Hi everyone, my name is Mrs. Dowd. I'm part of the First Communion team here at St. Michael's. And today we're going to get one step closer to making our first reconciliation. I'm going to start off by reading you a story from the Bible. The name of the story is The Parable of the Prodigal Son. And a parable is just another word for story. And Jesus liked to use parables to help his followers understand what he was trying to teach them. And we can talk a little bit more about that after we read the story. So here we go, The Parable of the Prodigal Son. From the Bible, The Prodigal Son. Once upon a time, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger son came to his father one day and said, "Father, give me the share of your money that will belong to me." The father agreed, and a few days later, his younger son left and traveled to a distant land, where he wasted all of the money on frivolous things. Soon he had no money, and he was hungry. So he took a job feeding pigs. He was so hungry, he wanted to eat the pigs' food. One day, he was feeding the pigs, and he thought to himself, "My father's servants have plenty of food to eat, and I am starving. I will go back home, beg my father to forgive me, and ask him to take me back, not as a son, but as his servant." The next day, he set off and went to his father. When he was still a far way from home, his father saw him on the horizon. The father was filled with joy, and he ran to greet his son, wrapping his arms around him and kissing him. The son said to his father, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Take me back as a servant." But his father said to his servants, "Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf, and prepare it so that we can eat and have a great celebration. For this son of mine was lost, but now he is found. He was dead, but now he is alive." Jesus loved to teach in parables because each person in the story teaches us a lesson. In this parable, the Father is God the Father. He always rejoices when we return to him. He is not angry with his son. He is delighted that the boy has come home. There may be times in your life when you feel far from God, but never think that God does not want you to return home. Never think that your sins are greater than God's love. The son in this story is called the prodigal son. Prodigal means careless and foolish. We are all careless and foolish at times. When we sin, we are being careless and foolish. But when we come to reconciliation, we are like the son returning home to his father, and his father rejoices. Okay, so that was the story of the prodigal son. And as we talked about before I read the story, the prodigal son is known as a parable because it's a story that's meant to teach us a lesson. And every character in the story is meant to represent something else. Jesus liked to use parables because when he was teaching, he was often teaching things that could be difficult to understand, or he was teaching people things that were different from the way they had always been taught to do something. He had new ideas, and to help people understand these new ideas, he used parables. In this particular parable of the prodigal son, the father is meant to represent God, our Father in heaven. And the prodigal son represents all of us. So God, the Father, or the Father in this story, is a loving person who loves his children. He loves them whether they're doing the right thing or whether they're making bad choices, whether they're in his home every day or whether they're someplace far away. And when they are far away, he's always happy to see them and welcomes them home with open arms. The son, like us, sometimes makes foolish choices, bad decisions, does things he knows he shouldn't do. As he was walking home, his father saw him far off in the distance, and instead of being angry that he had spent all his money foolishly and made some poor decisions, his father was thrilled. He wasn't angry, he wasn't upset, he was excited to have him home. And that's how God feels. And that's what the sacrament of reconciliation is all about. When we make choices that don't help us to be the best version of ourselves. It separates us and puts space between us and God. Not because God is removing himself from us, but because we're removing ourselves from God when we make these poor decisions. God is always there. He's always loving us, no matter what. We don't have to prove anything to God to make him love us. He doesn't love us because we're good. He doesn't love us because we do the right thing all the time. He just loves us. And so when we realize that we've made mistakes and we apologize and we say we want to try and do better, he's excited and he welcomes us back in and draws us close to him again so that we can feel his love. So what are some of the things we need to do to get ready for our first reconciliation? One of the things we need to do is sit quietly and think about some of the choices or decisions that we've made that have not allowed us to be the best version of ourselves. Things that maybe you would like to be forgiven for. And so we're just going to take a few quick minutes right now to talk about the son in this story and what it was that he wanted to be forgiven for. And we're going to use the dry erase boards that you have in your boxes to just do something really quickly. And we're going to do this for the son all together. But later on, with your family or by yourself, when you're thinking, you can use this dry erase board for the same thing. But instead of writing down what the son in the story was feeling that he needed forgiveness for, you can write the things you think you might need forgiveness for. You don't have to write them out. You can just draw a little picture to remind you of what it was, or put one or two words down just to help you feel better about being ready to make your first reconciliation. Okay, so we're going to start. Grab your dry erase board, your marker, and your eraser. Okay, so grab your dry erase board, and you're going to write on it, what was the thing that the son did that he was sorry for and he wanted to ask his father to forgive him for wasting all of his father's money. So if you write that out on your dry erase board, the son wasted all of his father's money, but then he was sorry and he wanted his father to forgive him. And he probably was scared to go back. He thought his father would be angry with him for wasting all of his money. And he was prepared to not ask to be taken back into the house as a son, but he would come back and be a servant and work for his father. But instead of his father being angry, he was so happy, he had a big party for him. And so by asking for forgiveness and saying he was sorry, you can now take your eraser and erase wasted all of his father's money, because that's no longer a sin. He's asked for forgiveness and the father has forgiven him. And that's what will happen when you go to reconciliation. You will talk with the priest, with Father Wayne, and let him know what are some of the things that you'd like to be forgiven for. And no, you probably haven't left home and wasted all your parents' money, but there are some things that you have done that you're not proud of, that have not made you feel good, and that you would like to be forgiven for. God will act through Father Wayne to let you know that you have been forgiven. Father Wayne will actually tell you that God has forgiven you. And then just like the dry erase board where we erased the sins of the son in that story, all of your sins will be erased as well. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go back into our box and we're going to take out the parent-child reflection sheet. This is what it looks like. And this is something you're going to work on together as a family. You're going to use the sheet to help you talk about some things that will help you get ready for reconciliation. You're going to talk about a time when you felt like you needed to be forgiven for something, and talk about someone who maybe you need to forgive. And then talk about how you can work on some of these things as a family and write it down. Maybe there's someone, a friend, or someone who used to be your friend that you haven't talked to in a long time, and you feel like you'd like to reach out to them and see how they're doing. Maybe there's someone that you were angry with that you haven't forgiven, and you realize that you would like to have a conversation with them and to forgive them. And the other thing that we would like you to do as part of this parent-child self-reflection is perform a random act of forgiveness. Now, hopefully you've heard of this, maybe you haven't, but a random act of kindness is when you do something kind for someone that they weren't expecting, and maybe you don't even know them. Sometimes people will do things like, if they're in the line at Dunkin' Donuts, they'll pay for the person's coffee behind them. Just because they want to do something nice to make someone's day when they weren't expecting it. Well, we're not going to ask you to do a random act of kindness, but we do want to ask you to do a random act of forgiveness. So someone who you haven't forgiven, just forgive them. And the last thing on the parent-child self-reflection sheet is called the prayer of contrition. Contrition is just a big fancy way of saying you're sorry. And so the prayer is to God, and it's asking Him to forgive you, to help you feel close to Him again, and to give you a clean heart and a fresh start. And you can say this prayer every day. Every day we can start fresh and start new. And it doesn't matter if we ask God one time to forgive us or we ask Him 3,000 times to forgive us. He always forgives us. He always loves us. And when we come into church to have reconciliation, whether it's our first time or our 15th time, the priest's not going to be angry. Father Wayne is not going to be angry. He's just so happy to see you. And God is not angry. He's not angry with us. He loves us, and He's happy to show us that He forgives us.